Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I'm joined by Eric Jorn, a partner here at the firm. Eric, you're an employee here, aren't you?
Well,
are you technically an employee if you're a partner here?
I can describe our structure. It's rather complicated, but vis-a-vis a management company, I am a partner, I am a employee here. I'm an employee of the management company, which is a parent of the firm and probably very complicated.
Yep, we're stopping you right now. Why don't I simplify it? Do you get a W-2?
I do get a W-2.
Okay.
So I am an employee.
Oh, let's talk about this for a second because there's all types of different employees in any given company. We'll go with something not complex. We'll go with a standard employee and one that is being subcontracted. And the question I want to get to is which one is the right choice for any given position?
Yep.
I'm certain you're going to say something along the lines of, well, it depends.
Yeah. Well, my favorite comment is I have a 1099 employee. Then I said, well, you don't have a 1099 subcontractor. You actually just have an employee if you call them an employee, which means they have to be paid on a W-2. So the rules around whether somebody is a subcontractor or they're an employee, it's a lot of it is actually look and feel, right? If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it is a duck. Well, if it looks like an employee, acts like an employee, it's going to be an employee. All the governing bodies are going to start with they're an employee until you can prove otherwise.
Okay. So in your experience, what industries would you say should have more subcontractors?
Yeah. There's definitely specific industries that have this more often. Salons are a big one.
What do you mean? Like they have employees that should just be subcontractors?
Or vice versa.
Really?
Yep. So a lot of times there's multiple structures that salon owners have, right? So this one might have it as a standard structure. They own the salon, all their stylists and all work for them as employees. They get a W-2 compensated normally. Then there's other salons in which they own the salon. They have the name, reputation, all that fun stuff. But then the stylists actually rent chairs back.
Ah, that's right.
Yes. Now all of a sudden you're starting to create what's called a subcontractor relationship. So if you are a subcontractor, there's lots of testing that you can go through. The IRS has a really comprehensive guide right on their website to figure out whether you're a subcontractor or an employee, or for you as an employer to figure out whether or not somebody that is providing services is additionally a subcontractor or an employee. Control is usually one of the biggest measurements, right? How much freedom does that person have to execute the way they want to? Or do you have them on a schedule which you set? Do they follow your processes, use your equipment? Do you pay them an hourly rate? Things like that. Again, right? All that stuff sounds like functions in which an employee does. But if I'm a subcontractor, right, really what that should look like is I have my own client list. I'm billing rates in which I want to bill. I am invoicing you and you're paying me. Ideally, I have a legal entity set up and you're not paying me as Jane Doe. Again, all these, and I'm providing similar services to other businesses. The salon deal is a little different in that regard, right? I think you can kind of create a pretty clear employee subcontractor distinction, really based on the relationship between you and the salon, right? That the renting of the chair is a pretty good, if that is the only way,
defining feature, right?
Exactly. If that's the only economic exchange between the two parties, I think that's a pretty clear line. But now let's talk, say, truck drivers. Truck drivers are another big one. Right. So again, if they have a lot of control, right? So, and here's a clear as day example. I own a trucking brokerage company, and I find another company that has the trucks and they have the drivers, and I pay them whatever mile rate that they want to invoice me for. I cut them a check to, Moving Stuff LLC. I cut them a check because they sent me an invoice for the miles that they transported. I offered them the bid, or I offered them the load at the certain bid rate. They accepted it. I might have to dictate some things only to meet expectations for the customer, but I'm not controlling their systems processes, right? They're needing to do their own safety inspections. They have their own IFTA filings, all this fun stuff. Clearly a subcontractor and or non-employer employee relation, clearly a subcontractor relation. Now I have John Doe. He's driving my truck. Even if I pay him a mileage rate instead of an hourly rate. So he's driving my truck, which is covered by my safety inspections. I'm doing the IFTA filings for them. They sound like an employee, don't they?
It does.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that line got a lot more blurred.
It can get blurred, and especially industries do create some clout around it, right? Trucking companies, a lot of them have been operating in that gray territory. The states have continued to decide with calling people employees as they come across these gray areas. So you really need to create that hardline distinction.
And I have a perfect example. So I work for a wedding videography company. Now I have my own business as well, but they subcontract me out. Well, they got audited. And, there's a few things they were trying to draw distinctions, because it's also tricky because they do have some salaried employees.
Yep.
So specifically the one who oversees the videography department, he is salaried. He does do the same things that I do, but they have their own process. He has equipment that is owned by the company.
Yeah.
And then there are the subcontractors. Me, I have my own equipment that I own. I run things kind of my own way, but I bill them just the same. We have an established rate, and I don't have set hours, but they send me contracts and I do the work.
Yep.
So it's interesting. I can see why there'd be some confusion, but here's also the other thing too. On their website, they'll show some of the available employees, but they're not really employees, because they'll say like, oh, these people are here, but they're not actually employees. They're just people they have available. So I can see why that would cause some confusion. Yeah,
definitely. Well, and in your case, right, you have an entity set up, and then you're also going out and you're finding your own gigs and you're providing it to other sources, and you have relationships with other venues that might contract you as well. So clearly you are providing it to the mass. Whereas if I'm providing services to only one company, that economic substance test right there is very hard. It's very hard to prove that you're not an employee if you are only working for that one business. Now, you might have an exclusive contract for a time period. And then once that contract lapses, maybe there's another one available, or I go back out to the marketplace. Now we're starting to get back into subcontractor territory. But generally, if somebody is an individual, we have a first name, last name, that's who we're paying, that's who we're working with, and that's the only person we're working with. And that, again, it's so hard to say that, hey, I'm a subcontractor in that point. You're an employee.
So two things. One, obviously, if there's a test on the IRS's website, this must be a popular issue, right? Yep. So people should go ahead and give it a go. And if, for example, if you are being, I don't want to say treated incorrectly, what are the penalties that people are looking at? Yeah.
So if you are paying, so one of the reasons why businesses sometimes like to pay subcontractors and subcontractors like to be paid as subcontractors.
We're literally jumping onto my next question. Go ahead.
All right, we'll circle back around. We'll get there.
That's fine.
Employers sometimes like subcontractors because they don't pay the FICA tax, Social Security, Medicare tax. More expensive to pay somebody like that.
Yeah.
On the subcontractor side of things, hey, I get to expense a lot of things against that income, right? I can expense my tools, my equipment, my mileage, all these fun things that might not be available to you as an employee. So oftentimes there are very beneficial reasons why people want to have that relationship.
Okay. Well, let's get really into it, specifically from a tax perspective for a business owner. What are the pros? What are the cons for an employee and a subcontractor? What would you say is kind of the big ones? We don't have to go into all the details.
Yep.
Kind of like the big ones people really hit home on.
Well, one of the nice things if it's a legit subcontractor is you're only paying them for the work that they're executing.
Makes sense.
You're not paying them FICA taxes, and you don't have to provide them benefits. Mm-hmm. So those are all good
in many
situational items.
In many ways, it makes sense. You say, I want you to do this. When this is done, here is the funds that we agreed on.
Yep.
And then you almost never have to think about it again.
Somewhat predictable.
Yeah. You get what you pay for in many ways, right?
Exactly. Now, some negatives, right, is, hey, I don't have control over how they do things. So they're going to use their own processes, methods, things like that. And then I'm bound to then check their work at the end to make sure or manage essentially from afar, I guess I'd say, what
loosely
manage exactly what they are doing and what they're executing. So there's a lot of trust that needs to be built between an employer and a subcontractor that is doing work on behalf of the business. So that's to me, I think that's the largest con to working with a subcontractor. Obviously, if you have really good talent, and they're not bound to an employment relationship, right? You can't give them things that retain, like benefits, bonuses, all that fun stuff, right? So now they're free to go do work wherever. And if they're really good, well, guess what? Other people are going to be knocking on their door all the time for their business. So lack of control and retention is probably the big negatives in my opinion on a subcontractor.
Well, and from a business standpoint, consistency is king. Right? Which I think falls into the employee category, right?
Exactly. You're going to get a lot more consistency using the same person that follows a systemized set of processes and procedures. And you deliver a consistent product and have expectations. And to me, the best business model is a consistent business model.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. Now, what happened? You brought up a good question. What happens if you get caught miscategorizing, say, a subcontractor as an employee?
Could we just circle back to what we were circling back to originally?
Yes, I love the corporate jargon. Let's circle back to that.
Put a pin in it. Okay, what happens if you get busted by the IRS?
So we get busted, right? So we paid this person, say, $50,000 over the year. And the IRS says, they're an employee. Now I'm responsible for those taxes that were supposed to be paid.
Oh.
Yep. And what the IRS doesn't treat very nicely is businesses that don't pay employment taxes because they look at that as stealing. So you're responsible for paying that back tax. That could be, say on $50,000. More than likely, they're going to have you cover both employee and employer portion of that. So 15.2% comes out to say $7,500 on that $50,000 plus penalties and interest. So say you're at somewhere between 10 and 15 grand of a mistake on that misclassified employee. Not to mention other things like, hey, I have a 401k plan. I have health insurance. Did I violate all these now employee items because I did not offer them because I didn't call them an employee?
So basically you're looking at potentially an entire year of not offering benefits, and those really stack up. And if there's anything we've learned from payroll,
yes,
is that you do not want to screw these things up.
Exactly. So it could be rather catastrophic if you had, especially in that case where they're paid a substantial amount like an employee and they feel like an employee, and they would be offered all those benefits as an employee. Well, that could be a lot of crap raining down on you.
So take the test, I guess, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
But let's go, Eric, just hit me with the line.
Yep. If it's worth the phone call, right? Pick up the phone, give us a call. We can walk through it. Well,
it was the other one. It was if it looks like an employee.
If it looks like an employee, talks like an employee, acts like an employee, it's an employee.
If it's not, then it's probably a subcontractor. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors. providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.